we are committed at Definiti to helping plan sponsors and financial advisors alike navigate the legislative and regulatory changes for all their retirement plans. Secure 2.0 is no exception. So our panel of experts are here to help us go through the various plan provisions and changes that are coming our way with Secure 2.0. So Betsy, our ERISA attorney, Matt Knorr, our director of operations, and Michelle, who knows everything, I should say, she's a catch-all, would like to stage some insights, and we'll be keeping this as an open forum. So by all means, feel free to interject with any questions, and we'll certainly try to address if pertinent. If not, we will follow up after the event today. So Matt, let's start things with you. Tell us a little bit about how Definiti started planning process to make sure that our plan sponsors and advisors were ready for these plan provisions forthcoming.
Yeah, thanks, Will, and welcome everybody. It's hard to believe Secure 2.0 was actually put into law all the way back on December 29th of 2022. So we've been navigating this here for almost 2 years now. So the first thing that we had to do, was obviously familiarize ourselves with, the 90 plus provisions that are part of the act. And so we here at Definiti, we put together our Secure 2.0 committee that consisted of myself, representation from our legal team, our documents team, service and marketing teams, so that could start to familiarize ourselves with the provisions and determine exactly how all these provisions would impact our clients. And as we were reading through the provisions, we learned, there were a lot of great things that the IRS introduced into law with Secure 2.0. We also learned that the IRS isn't necessarily the most detailed. And there were a lot of things that were in the provisions that, although are great provisions, they didn't really provide a lot of guidance on, how plan sponsors and TPAs like ourselves and record keepers could actually implement some of these and how they were going to be handled in operation. So for the past year and a half or so, we have been slowly getting some more guidance on some of these provisions that I know are hot topics for some of our clients. Still need to get some more guidance on some of them, but we have been getting some guidance on those. And I think kind of the biggest thing that we've been navigating here, since Secure 2.0 became a law, is really trying to find that balance in the communication of these complex provisions out to our clients. Sending out all 90 of those provisions isn't probably in the best interest of our clients, and it would just overwhelm them. So really going through all the provisions, looking at the ones that are the most impactful, and the ones that we feel are going to be the most again, impactful to our clients, and communicating that out to them and working with them on those major provisions to ensure that they're properly administering these provisions properly going forward.
Perfect, Matt. Let me pose a question here to Betsy then as well. Betsy, how has Definiti shared our recommendations with these plan sponsors on Secure 2.0 and the plan provisions? And obviously these are our recommendations based on our document and everything else, but can plan sponsors elect to make changes that are different than what we've recommended, or are some of them obligatory?
Yeah, those are great questions, Will. We actually send out all of our communications about our default elections via some email blasts. They're also posted to our Secure 2.0 landing page on the website, which is a great resource for plan sponsors and advisors. And no plan sponsors locked into using Definiti defaults. Those were intended to be a starting point for plan sponsors to implement Secure 2.0. As we've been talking and training our RPCs, I think they're getting to know how these might affect their particular clients. So if a plan sponsor does not want to use a particular Definiti default, they simply need to call their RPC, so the RPC can track how the plan sponsor is operating until the plan has to actually be amended for Secure 2.0, which I don't think is until the end of 12/31/2026 for most of our 401k plans. Michelle, correct me if I'm wrong.
You are 100% correct. And the key there is documenting how you're operating the plan under these provisions, because an actual amendment to the plan will most likely not be available until late 2025. So you can operate under the provisions that are effective as of now. And then the actual amendment itself will come at a later date.
Right. We call it good faith operational compliance.
And obviously every plan is different. So what might be a good fit for one, those defaults might, for most, it's not going to be the same for everybody. So. Perfect. Well, thank you for that. There's a few more things that are definitely more forthcoming. So let's talk a little bit about the enhanced catch-up provisions for ages of 60 to 63. I know the IRS, I'm sure everyone here might be aware, they just released the new plan limits for 2025 that includes the higher catch-up limits for those older participants who are, still working. Michelle, first let's go over these higher catch-up limits, and then maybe what are you hearing about the change kind of in the industry and kind of through these conversations?
Certainly. Definiti's default will obviously be to allow for those additional catch-ups to the plan that most likely will ultimately be mandatory, but we don't know that as of yet. But catch-up limits are similar to annual employee deferral limits in that they are tax year based. So beginning with the 2025 tax year, individuals who have attained age 60 through 63 will have additional amounts that they can put in as catch-up contributions to the plan. The IRS language is the greater of $10,000 or 150% of the regular 2025 catch-up, which is summed up as $11,250 for someone who's attained age 60 through 63. We did have a question, when is that available to an individual? Is it as soon as they turn 60? Is it the next year? So anyone who attains that age during that tax year will have the availability of that additional limit. So if I were to turn, though I'm far too young, 60 in December 15th of 2025, I do now have that higher limit for 2025.
Oh, good. So it mirrors the standard 50-year-old catch-up as well. So good.
Yeah, I think the important thing with that as well is to make sure that our plan sponsors are communicating with their payroll providers. Most of the larger payroll providers should have flags and things where they can identify the people that are in that age group. But I would recommend that all of the people that have participants that are in that age group reach out to their payroll providers and confirm if there's any special things that they need to do to be able to have employees, take advantage of that higher limit.
Yeah, especially it being a new rule, they probably aren't even aware that they could put more in unless it's addressed, of course, through payroll. Yeah. One of the other bigger changes, just want to take a moment to talk about is automatic enrollment. Definiti is writing new plans now that include automatic enrollment for participants starting January 1st, 2025. But the option is available to current plans as well, too, correct?
Correct.
That is correct.
As far as the industry goes, this new provision, the starting rate has kind of been a topical piece of what that starting rate should be, 3% to 10%. So I did want to pose a question to the audience here with a quick poll. These for new clients, startups, of course, but even existing ones as well. What do we find should be the default enrollment rate, and why do we think it's best? So I was going to pose a question here to the group. We did put up 3, 5, or 10%. So we can just take a brief moment to check on that.
And as we're compiling those results and waiting for them to come through, with the new automatic enrollment rules, the minimum requirements are that anybody that has not been defaulted in or has not made an election, has to be defaulted at a 3% deferral rate. And then the requirements allow or require for there to be auto escalation each year annually up until 15%. Or is it 10%? Sorry.
You can stop at 10.
10%.
The maximum you could do is 15.
So the reason why we have the 3, 5, and 10 out there is there's also a requirement that if you start at 10%, you don't have to have auto escalation. So Definiti's default is to default everybody starting at the 3% with the auto escalation. But we're curious if people think that 10% might be more appealing to our plan sponsors because then they don't have to deal with the auto escalation each year and to determine who needs to be escalated and then coordinate with payroll and get all that updated to properly administer the plan.
Sure, sure. And the results did come in here as well. Looks like it's pretty much 3% was kind of the runaway, 5%, and then a few at 10 as well. So I could certainly see both sides of what makes sense, starting at 3 and then auto increasing. Every plan's different, plan design is, very pertinent. If it's a larger plan, might be harder for them to track who needs to be increased on an annual basis up into that, threshold. If plans are having problems, administering it, maybe something to think about would be, a 316 service to help, monitor and track that as well. So
another key point would be to Secure 2.0 does allow for incentives to have individuals participate in an employer plan. And you might want to spin that and say, everyone who turns in an affirmative election, which would be an actual completed form, even with 0%, will go into a raffle for a $50 Amazon gift card. Then you don't have to worry about that auto enrollment piece because you have an actual form that says 0% or whatever percentage that they want to do. And then you can also avoid that auto escalation.
Right.
Yeah, I think the most important thing to recognize with this new provision is that the easiest way to make sure that there's no issues or corrective action that's needed in the future is to try to get your participants to make those elections. Especially if it's a smaller company, I understand larger companies, that's a little bit more challenging, but a lot of our client base are those small to mid-size market type plans. And you're going to avoid a lot of issues in the future if we just make sure that all the participants make an election. So if that's possible, and you're recommending options to your clients, always use that as the number one priority.
Agreed. And I think it'll be even more critical to make sure we're keeping good documentation as to who actually affirmatively enrolled and who was defaulted into the plan. So we know who needs to be automatically increased or who is actually electing their own specific percentage, which is critical to have these records kept as far as IRS and DOL are concerned.
Perfect. And there are a lot of provisions that, as we've addressed, that we're still waiting further clarification on. And for some, they might be popular, but they're still not fully defined. The one that's popped up a lot I've had of late is like the provision of student loans and the matching component there as well. Just briefly on that topic, what's our guidance on, these provisions where we're kind of waiting, specifically like on the student loan provision or other ones that are wait and see?
I think Definiti set our default that the plan would not provide for matching for student loan repayments. I think that might primarily be a custodial issue, how the custodians would handle that. Sure. In that from an employer standpoint, they're just going to, they do need to receive certification that the individual is legally obligated to make those loan payments. They have to get annual certification of the total that was made in that plan year by way of repayments, and they are subject to 402G limits. So if you had a monster year of repaying your loan, you'd have a maximum of which the employer would match. But it again comes down to probably the administration of it too, Matt, right? There's separate testing, things of that nature. So probably want to see how that shakes out once custodians know how to record keep it and how it will impact your plan, which is a good design, feature to maybe to discuss with your retirement plan consultant.
Right. Yeah, that was one of the provisions, when we started reading through everything, it got a lot of buzz out in the media and a lot of people have talked about it. But it was one of those where there wasn't a lot of guidance provided by the IRS. Slowly, the record keepers and to some extent the payroll providers have started to catch up a little bit. That's primarily the reason why that's currently one of our defaults to not allow for it. Certainly, there's going to be clients and plan sponsors out there that are interested in that, and depending on your workforce, it's something that they may want to implement. And I would just encourage you, if you have a client that is interested in that, reach out to our retirement plan consultants, and we can talk through that and determine the feasibility of it right now. My guess is probably going into 2026. The record keepers are going to be in a much better position to be able to administer those and help our plan sponsors with that provision. Right now, in limited instances, it can work, but there's still constantly additional information and guidance coming out on how to exactly administer those types of arrangements.
Correct. And yeah, with so as you mentioned, 90 plus provisions with Secure 2.0, we could sit here and talk all day about them, but I think we did address, most pertinently, the bigger topics that have been, arising.